All right, what up? What up? What up? What up? What up? Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. It's been a minute, because of the holiday. We take federal holidays, okay? Transform 314. So I know it's been a minute. Y'all ain't seen me. And I know you like, wait, who is that person? Who is that chilling in this beautiful green sitting next to me? Y'all, this is no one. This is y'all. When I tell you literally, if it wasn't for this lady, I would not be here. My mama would not be here. None of us would be here. This is our family's matriarch, Miss Gwendolyn Brown, aka my granny. What's up, Granny? How you doing?
Fine, thank you.
How you doing? So real quick, please. Obviously, I know you because I know you my whole life. Feel free to introduce yourself. Let the internets know who you be. Who are you?
I am Gwendolyn Tyler Brown. I am a native St. Louisan. I'm a retired school teacher. I taught for 41 years. 25 of the years were in middle school with eighth graders. I've been retired in excess of 20 years.
Yeah.
That's enough.
So shout out to her. Clearly, she is a retired educator. So when I tell y'all she is with it, this lady is with it with current events, sports, entertainment. I mean, literally all the things. She's in the know. She's with it. And so I said, you know what? Who can I have as a special guest on my Monday Night Live? And I was like, my granny, duh. Because she not only is, I mean, well-rounded, she's a former educator, so she got some stuff going on up there. And this lady is probably the most opinionated person I know. She has an opinion about literally everything. And sometimes, unsolicited. But it's okay. It's okay because I love my grandmother. So this is a special show, and we got some space when it comes to generations. So I thought this would be a great conversation to have with someone that's a little bit more seasoned. So you ready to get into this?
Sure.
I do have to provide a disclaimer before we start. So first off, the responses provided by Miss Gwendolyn Brown over here do not necessarily reflect the views of Transform 314. Okay?
And I have an opinion about everything.
So we're going to get into it. I do want to say, y'all, the county council did not meet at all this week because of the holiday. And so because of that, all of our highlights going to be about the city. And we two city residents. So no shade to our county fam. Love y'all, but y'all people ain't me. So you ready to get into this?
Yep.
All right. So the first highlight, the proposed Right to Know Act, aka Board Bill 82, was discussed during the Public Safety Committee meeting last week. And so the bill sponsor is Alderman Aldridge, a newer alderman. However, he was a former state rep. So he ain't, he's not a complete newbie. But he is a sponsor for this bill. And my understanding is the purpose of this bill for him is to increase transparency between the St. Louis Police Department and us residents. And also, just to make sure that we know our rights when we're dealing with the 5-0. So I'm going to play this clip because Alderman Aldridge, again, this is his bill. So he lays out the two components about what this bill does.
So the first part of it is the identification part. So anytime a officer is interacting with a civilian, they would need to provide them with a business card. And the things that would need to be on that business card that trying to put in ordinance in a lot of these things that is actually in the legislation. I met with the chief of police. They have very similar wording in their policy. Met with the chief because the policy isn't online. So wanted to make sure any piece of legislation that we pass that we're working in tandem with law enforcement, with also making sure that we are doing things so our citizens and constituents know their rights. So the identification part would be a business card with an officer name, rank, badge number, email would have to be ideally on the front, and then on the back side would be the Civilian Oversight Board contact number and information. So if during an interaction with a civilian and law enforcement, if a civilian wanted to make a complaint or even make a compliment, they could be able to have the Civilian Oversight number. I know that is a piece of legislation that we passed, not myself, but have got done at this board, has been in the works for a very long time, especially after the death of Ferguson, or the death of Mike Brown during Ferguson. It reactivated a lot of people who really wanted the COP. So the COB would be on the backside of that card. And again, this would be when officers are having interaction with civilians. Now, there is some exemptions where this card would not necessarily need to be presented. And on page 4, lay out some of those exemptions. Also on page 2 in the consent search part, a few of those exemptions, if an officer is providing a arrest or a summons, then the card would not need to be provided. If the officer have probable cause or suspicion of activity, then the card also would not need to be provided. If an officer is is on duty and they're like doing an investigation, they would not need to provide a card. Undercover, I'm going to say if an officer is undercover, they would not need to provide a card. If they see that the person is trying to destroy evidence or flee from the scene or harm somebody else, they would not need to provide a card. These would be very minor infractions where if an officer is approaching somebody or if they pulled them over because they was potentially running a red light, they would need to provide their business card with their name, information, badge number, and the COB information on the back. The second part of the bill is a consent search. And I think that's really the important one, is, again, making sure that people know their rights. So the consent search would only take place, again, if there's like not probable cause, if there is not suspicion of the individual trying to cause harm to somebody else or themselves, destroy evidence. This would be more if an officer is having a conversation with somebody and they happen to see either they have a bag and they want to search it. They would have to give the individual their rights to say, hey, I would like to provide a consensual search to look in your bag. You have the right to either deny that search, or you have the right to allow me to search your bag or your personal belonging or your property, either vehicle or home. Any point during that consent search, the individual would have the ability to continue to allow the officer to search or to revoke their consent search and say, I don't feel that I want to continue the search. And again, there's also some exemptions.
Whew, y'all, yeah, we've been talking over here with our little mics muted over here. So, Granny, what are your thoughts on this?
This is not a perfect world. And the only way something like this would work is in a perfect world. All the policeman has to say is like stand your ground kind of stuff. Oh, I think I was in danger or whatever. They can make it say whatever they want to say when they want to say it. A card is not going to solve the problem.
A card is not. So you don't think that having something tangible or means that the police officer will have to like literally identify themselves with, you don't think that will do anything in like increasing transparency and like improving the relationships between police and community? You think that's not going to do any of that?
That's a waste of good cardboard.
You said you think it's a waste of good cardboard. Oh Lord, not a good waste of cardboard. So you, and also the other part of the which you mentioned, again, some of the loopholes maybe, but the other part too, in addition to them handing the business cards, the consent to the search. So what do you think about that part of like people Even
Like I say, if it's a perfect world, that would work. But there are going to be some circumstances where maybe the policeman's not going to have time to worry about, do you mind if I do this, or do you mind if I do that? Nah.
But isn't that, I mean, in certain instances though, isn't that like part of the law?
I think it depends on
The circumstance.
Yeah, on who they're dealing with. Some people they can hand that card to, they can't even read the card. It's a waste of good cardboard.
It is a waste of good cardboard. Wow. Okay. So we're gonna keep it moving. And I'm not gonna play all the clips, but I want to play this next one because this one is the police chief, Tracy. Super East Coast dude. I think he's from New York. But I wanted to play a clip from him because he provides his 2 cents on how he feels about the current state of the bill. And also, I think because I know he mentioned that he had some concerns with the bill, with it being redundant. And so I do want to play this clip because this is a bit of an exchange between him and Alderwoman Sonia, who's she's like super new, elected official. So let's listen because he kind of speaks to more of the concerns and she has some other questions for him. So let's listen to it.
I know you kind of mentioned about the concerns about redundancy in policy. But if this is a policy already, then it would just be a repeated policy. And if it's not a policy, but it's a policy that we think can lead to transparency and equity and community trust, which are things that I value greatly, and I know many in our community do, and many of our officers do too, then what could be the harm in putting this, in having this in place if it's going to be redundancy? And if it's not in place, then it kind of gives a guide as far as what it could look like.
Yeah, well, I believe in transparency, and one of the things that I'm looking to do that I've done in other departments is to try to make sure that we can publicly put out our special orders and our policies. And I think that should be out to the public, and it should, with minimal redactions, obviously, for tactics and patterns and practices you want to be careful, but minimal, and get that out to the community so you can see that. Because sometimes and this is not really when I say redundancies, we have good policy in place where that if you ask for a police officers, first of all, we're identified also in uniform. We have body-worn cameras. We have recorded where we're at locations. We do have a form for a consent to search if it's not an exception or a warrant. There's things that we do, but in this bill right now, there's things in it where it's case scenario based. And should we hand out the card in this? Is there consent to do this? There's so many different things that I don't know. It's not very clear. But what I do know is clear in our policy, which consists across all boards in any situation, even traffic stops. If you ask the officer their name and badge number, they're mandated by the chief of police to give it to. It's already been in the policy, and it's something I'm never going to change. It's been policies in other places. And that creates consistency and stops the confusion. And I think that's better if a person actually wants to make a complaint or a compliment for a police officer, complaint or a compliment. We have a way to educate them where we have the joint complaint form for the Civilian Oversight Board and the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, or you can make those calls. You can make those calls, and if there's a complaint or compliment against an officer, they have it. And if an officer doesn't give that, and we find out it's not, we will investigate that. And if that's an instructional thing that someone didn't understand, then we'll fix it. If it's intentional, and then it should be addressed progressively through discipline. And so that is across the whole board. This is carving out pieces, and at certain different scenarios where I want to make sure it's clear to our officers and clear to the community, because when you start creating confusion, sometimes that can lead to mistrust. And if you have a consistent policy that's giving you a name, badge number, and a way to make a complaint, it's already there. And that's where I'm trying to. If you look at the bill, it's going after specific times when and where you should be giving a card, when not to, consent to search. We all have that in our orders, and we definitely have it how we escalate and by case law.
But if your policies are not online and they're not publicly there's a lot of, we're legislators, we're elected, so I'm sure we're much more educated on what is there or what is in the process. But even in the bills we're discussing, I've had to, use the access that we have as legislators to go ask questions directly because the information is not available online. So to me, this bill, this is about folks who, it's one thing for it to be transparent. It's another thing for someone to be telling you. And I think it could be a good thing for an officer to just, hey, here, this is who I am. Like you said, I've never had an issue with an officer since being elected, which again, that's a very different position than a lot of members in our communities with getting that access or having that information shared. But it is, if that information is not publicly available, in addition to lots of the public just not being aware of what their rights are, which to me is what this bill is getting at, that information is not online. It's not publicly available. So it's not as easy to educate and to make sure that people know that it's accessible and that it's, hey, this is where you can go to go get it.
Y'all, we going back and forth over here listening to these clips. So I wanted to lift up a couple of things because my granny over here, she's been giving me an earful. So first, so you said while the police chief, he was speaking his points about, again, talking about how this bill is pretty much duplicating the policies that they already have in place when it comes to, again, the police officers having to identify themselves, even having a form or their own processes. Yeah, the body cam, the even he said they have their own form when it comes to the consent to search and all of that stuff. So he's saying that it's kind of duplicating what's already in place, right? And so you agree. So you say, yeah, like what's,
Yeah. I say in a perfect world, like I've said before, if everybody stays within their limits and know what they're supposed to do, everything works. But everybody the police is dealing with, all the people they're dealing with are not nice little sweet law-abiding citizens who fear the police. And I don't know, I just think it's just saying the same thing, what he's already said. It's a whole lot of what he's already said.
I do, again, because we gotta have a dialogue here. So listen to Alderwoman Sonier's point, because even if these are policies, maybe they are policies. I don't know the policies of St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, but hell, shouldn't we know? Like, if these are policies, shouldn't we be able to access them? Because it seems like right now, I don't think they're as publicly accessible, you know what I'm saying, for folks to even be able to know that this even exists. And I think that's what they're saying is like this bill is kind of bringing that to light and lifting that up a little bit. So what do you think about that? Because some of these things, I didn't know that these were their policies. The only reason why I know is because I'm sitting here listening to this committee meeting.
The only reason you know, because you're not out here creating problems for the police. That's why you don't know.
But what does that have to do with knowing your rights as a citizen, as a resident? So that's all I'm saying is, how are we supposed to know if it's not publicly available, if it's not included in this bill? That's all I'm saying. How are we supposed to know?
It's just some more paper, some more bad cardboard.
So y'all, we could go round and round. So what I will say is, because I'm not going to play, I did have a couple more clips, but what I will say is there was more discussion, including some public comment, where the people that were there, they were in support of the bill. And ultimately the bill, it passed out of the committee with the do pass recommendation for full consideration of final passage by the Board of Aldermen, narrowly, though I will say narrowly. And then when it got to the full Board of Aldermen, Alderman Aldridge, he kind of tried to put it on a fast track, for it to be perfected last week, because, and I do want people out there to know, a lot of older people are trying to kind of get these bills passed because the Board of Aldermen, they go on their summer break after Friday. So they trying to get these bills passed before they go on their 2-month break. And so that's what he attempted to do. However, he didn't have enough votes through the full Board of Aldermen to be able to fast track that. However, y'all, this is not the end of this bill. There's going to be even more discussion had. It seemed like he was even going to reach out to the police chief, because the police chief, even a representative from the St. Louis Police Officers Association, mentioned that they were willing to like continue to have these conversations with the aldermen to kind of flesh the bill out a bit more, so that like everyone wins in this situation. And they said they seem open to talking to him and working it out. So
but isn't that something, knowing what your rights are and all of that? I mean, shouldn't that come from the educational system too? I mean, kids go to school, take government.
do they though now?
I don't know. I haven't been in 20 years.
Right. Well, I'm gonna ask you. You've been enjoying the retired life.
Yes.
But yeah, so we're gonna keep it moving, you all. And real quick, I know you'll probably see someone in the background, so I'm telling you that right now. That's my grandfather. So if you see a moving fixture, it's him. So we're gonna move along to the second highlight. So Board Bill 29. I'm sure y'all probably heard this before. I've talked about it on this platform. People have talked about it on the news too. And it's a bill sponsored by Alderwoman Kara Spencer. And if passed, it will make it unlawful in the city for folks to carry guns openly without a concealed carry permit. So again, this is the part 2 of the discussion of this bill. She discussed it in the Public Safety Committee maybe a month or so ago. And so this is kind of the second go round with this bill. So I do want to play this clip because she lays out kind of what the bill is. And she also explains her proposed changes to make the bill better. So listen to her thoughts on it.
Board Bill 29 does restrict, again, just the open carrying of firearms for those who don't have a concealed carry permit. The concealed carry permit on the state of Missouri can be obtained for folks 19 and older. So what this would immediately do is eliminate open carrying of firearms by juveniles and children within our city. As a matter of business today, I have a committee substitute, which I have circulated to the committee. It does 4 things. We've done a lot of work on this bill since the introduction, and I want to commend the chairman here, as well as the vice chairman, and frankly, all the members of the committee for having one-on-one conversations and working to make this bill better. And certainly it is in a better place, and the city councilor for helping to identify some issues. So with that, the 4 things that the committee substitute does do, it changes, first of all, the language around the permit. It removes some language to make it more streamlined in case the state law changes in any way, and it just conforms and makes the removes some unnecessary language describing the concealed carry permit. Number 2, it also changes the penalty from less than $500 or requiring a $500 minimum to making that less than $500. So no more than $500 fine for this ordinance violation. And it also directs juveniles to our juvenile court system as opposed to going through municipal court, and kind of removes some other language with regards to the confiscation at conviction clause. And there's been some confusion around this particular amendment because it does not conviction clause does not restrict our police department from taking a weapon. It simply removes the conviction confiscation piece.
So what do you think? What do you feel about this bill, Granny? You think it's a great idea?
I think people ought to be walking around carrying guns without a permit. And I think that's part of the problem with that they're having downtown with the kids going berserk, because they feel like they're entitled. They can do what they want to do, and they're doing it. What would you need? I'm not gonna go there.
I know, but that's real. I mean, honestly, and we live in a gun-toting, state of misery, I call it.
Just like
Missouri.
the old cowboy pictures in the old West.
Our state loves our Second Amendment. We love our guns, but again, like assault rifles, like war guns, like I don't think that's appropriate at all. But so she laid out again some of the changes, because as I said, a month ago people were kind of split on it, and so she's been having conversations with folks in the committee, and she made some of the changes. So again, the fine, instead of it being at least $500, is capped at a maximum $500. That's one of the proposed changes. And then also in the other bill, instead of juveniles going to juvenile court or whatever, they were directed to dealing with the municipal courts if they were found not in non-compliance with the ordinance. So I do want to play one more clip, and this is, you guessed it, the police chief, Trace, because he's he's their leader, so especially when it comes to all things policy in the police department. So I want to know, how did he feel about this bill? So
Board Bill 20.
We'll listen to him.
I believe this is just another tool in an overall comprehensive plan to try to make our city safer. And I think if done right, we get this through, would certainly help us. And my concerns, and I spoke with the chairman of the Public Safety Committee and the chairwoman of the Budget Committee, who's sponsoring this bill. I had concerns from the operational piece. I had concerns of what authority this was going to give our police officers, what liabilities were in place, checking with city councilor and making sure we're in a good place for liability to our police officers. And then on top of that, more importantly, how can we do this as we approach a person with a deadly weapon, and to make sure we keep all parties safe, everyone, sanctity of life. We don't want to make sure that these things get escalated. And I think one of the major things, and I'll get into some of the practices that I foresee that are already in our policy, because you don't really change policy, it's how you approach a person if you're going to issue a summons and or make an arrest. And also you start a preliminary investigation first off, and you try to go from there. But I think we got to make sure there's an educational piece. Should this go through, everybody should know that the law has changed. Open carry, unless you have a concealed carry permit as an adult, that's the only time you can carry, and you have to produce it when asked if you're going to open carry. So an education piece has to be put out on this to make sure, and also an education piece and an additional training piece internally with our law enforcement officers to understand this. Should this bill be passed? And then within the policy, we already have in our policy, in the special orders 8.01, and actually specifically section 6 that goes to J, what actually also talks about ordinances and summonses, and how we should handle them, and how we should approach people, and how we should take care of that after possibly a summons or an arrest is made for violating this ordinance. And that's also in our policy. And then also our overall arrest booking and related procedures falls into this. And there's certain things on how we approach. We don't really have to change much, because the good policy is about approaching people and making arrests, and especially in a violation and a summons that's summonsable in some areas and an arrest in others. And the compliance that needs to be involved by the understanding that this new ordinance is going to be put in place. And those were my concerns, and being able to approach someone, actually this ordinance is going to give the officers the authority to approach, question, and ask a person for their concealed carry if they're an adult, and obviously if they're juveniles, no, they don't. They're not going to have the concealed carry permit. But start from there, and then make sure that we can take some dangerous weapons off the street, issue summonses where appropriate, and if there's any additional activity, if there's any additional warrants or background checks that come about, we'll take the appropriate action by policy.
So, I mean, he kind of spoke to, again, as he said, the implementation and like how I guess they would kind of, move through that and do the best that they could with doing it. I think something that I did want to look up that he mentioned, and they talked about this even before this bill was presented, was police officers' liability. Because, if you recall the unfortunate shooting at Central Visual Performing Arts High School, the police actually went to that young man's residence, but the police couldn't take the gun away.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't. And then there was also talk of a state law basically making it so that police officers literally they can't seize weapons or whatever, even if people are in danger of harming themselves or others, but they're kind of handicapped to kind of do some things because they could get sued or have some kind of liability. So the chief, he acknowledged that because he said, I want to make sure if we roll this thing out that our police officers aren't held liable or there's other, liabilities. Sense. Yeah, I think it does. And so I swear our state, boy, we something else. We are something else.
Confederate state.
That's real.
The Civil War still going on.
That's real. So real quick. Oh, I did want to play one more clip because I think that there was obviously, y'all know it was a lot of discussion around this bill. I did want to lift up one more.
I believe
one of the alder people.
The lady.
Yeah, Alderwoman Keys.
She hit the nail right on the head.
So I wanted to lift up her comments because I know this is something that I've heard a lot in community and a lot of people bring up. So listen to what Alderwoman Keys had to say about the bill.
And on a regular basis, we are seeing parents being left out of the equation when it comes to monitoring, supervising our young people. A lot of the things that are happening in downtown St. Louis in the wee hours of the morning involving people who are well underage, whose parents should know where they are. So my concern is that how do we enjoin parents? Let's say a young person, 13 years old, 14 years old, they're standing on the corner, whether they are 15, the police officer engages them. They naturally don't have the concealed carry permit, and the weapon is confiscated. They may be taken to the local juvenile facility, and knowing the capacity, that was a former tracker for juvenile offenders for 9 years. So we know that for every young person that they may engage, they really don't have a place to put them. But in remanding those young people back to their parents, what are the consequences for that young person as well as for the parent? Again, we cannot continuously leave the parent out of this process. And so I would like to see at some point, and again, I don't want to rush this thing, but I think that there needs to be some language, some verbiage at some point that gives information on what the consequences could be, should be for parents of young people who, and in some ways, may not even be aware that their young person is standing on a street corner, carrying a high-powered rifle that may yet be stolen. So that's a discussion that I would like to see added to this as well.
Thank you, Alderwoman, from the 11th. I think that this is something, we talked about a little bit briefly earlier today, that the board can look into in a general sense. It gets so complicated, especially when thinking about, kids who are homeless or maybe are in foster care and don't have, there's just a lot of complicating factors here that I think we all are aware of in thinking through. I appreciate that your willingness to bring this up and to consider this over maybe over break. And if there's anything I can do to further that conversation.
You cut out there a little bit for me, at least at the end there. But
I did.
Yes, Alderwoman.
I just said if there's anything I can do to further that conversation, that work, please let me know.
Yeah, the parents. Again, I have this conversation a lot with folks in community about, these youngins out here doing all the things, all the wrong things. And so, Granny, I know you said that you agreed with Alderwoman Keys's comments.
How in the world can you not know your underage child is somewhere at 2:00 in the morning? How can you not know that? So if you don't know that, then you need to be locked up.
So are you proposing that there's language in there or something that penalizes parents to hold them accountable to what if their
I
children
think they ought to be
here?
fined, and if it doesn't do any good, the first fine, do some days in jail, and take that badass child to jail with.
Oh my gosh, take that badass child to jail with you. So real quick, I
shouldn't have said that.
Whatever, it is what it is. It's out there now. But because you were a teacher, you taught for longer than I've been alive. Wow. Yeah. And I know you've had some interactions and some, you've had to deal with parents. So, how were you able to work with parents for the betterment of the child, support the child?
I've had some parents. I taught at one school so long that I was working with generations.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh wow, yeah.
I found that the school was closer to the school was how can I put it? Well, it was important. It isn't now. It doesn't appear to be now. I had some parents that I had never met and taught many, many children from their family, and I never met them. Mm. And then I had some parents who were involved in what was happening in the school and made sure that their children performed in the right way as far as learning and the behavior. But it's a whole different ballgame out here now. The teacher is not that important anymore. Like, the teacher was the bomb back in the day. The fire department, the police department, and the teacher. That's what all the kids wanted to do. Now, well, they don't like policemen too much.
Not all policemen.
No, I mean,
yeah. Okay.
I don't mean individually. Yeah. What's that song? That F-U-C-K, the police.
But that came out in the 80s.
Ain't nobody wrote nothing to say F-U-C-K, the fire department had it.
That was in the 80s or not. Well, I cannot. I guess I don't know. It
was a different age.
It's definitely different, and I do think that looking at again the family dynamics and just a lot of things that impact that, I think that should be a larger conversation. because it's a lot of different circumstances.
Well, you know, it used
what
to
I'm
be
saying?
when we could do corporal punishment,
Oh Lord, so you
and you didn't have to do it regularly.
so you used to beat kids up?
That was a part of your supplies when you came in. You got a rattan, and you were instructed to soak it so it didn't break.
So you used to beat kids up in your class?
Better that I beat them up and they beat me up. So that, you know, it wasn't everybody, it was the few. But when the parents found out about it, they gave them another one when they got home. You know, it wasn't like it is now. I don't know. I don't think you ought to beat kids.
Okay.
It's a whole different situation now. But I mean, you didn't kill them. You know, you gave them a few licks.
A little pops.
Yeah.
But I think that's fair. But this bill again, this is a start. This isn't the end all be all. Not one single piece of legislation is going to solve all problems. You know what I'm saying?
And everybody's not going to be satisfied no matter what you do.
That's real. So I do want to lift up what happened with this bill. So the bill, and there was more discussion. There were public comments too, collected from residents of the city, and they all weren't in favor of the bill because they felt like there should be more community engagement.
But they're gonna have to find some solutions about what to do with these gunslinging kids. These kids need something to do other than congregate downtown and create problems. What else? What are their recreational?
It's nothing. I mean, I remember coming up in the early 2000s as a teenager. We had a lot more options, and now it's really not a lot.
I mean, opening the community center 2 hours longer. And you don't have anybody to work in there those 2 hours anyway.
I think that, again, I think that could be part of a solution if making sure that these places are adequately staffed, that they are like places and spaces where some of these youngins that's out here, making it appealing for them to go to. I think it could help, maybe, but that's not going to be the end all.
No.
But I did want to lift up this bill. There were some other proposed changes lifted up by the alder people during their discussion. Alderwoman Velasquez, she suggested, because I know Alderwoman Spencer was talking about putting some tracking in there to, see like who the police officers were citing or whatever it was. And Alderwoman Velasquez, she wants there to be language for them to monitor race and gender of people that are being cited or approached or whatever with these, that are not in non-compliance or whatever if the bill passes. And also Alderwoman Sonia, she lifted up, maybe issues that folks may have paying that $500. So she also wants to include some community service in there for people that aren't in adherence with the ordinance. So after the back and forth, all of those proposed changes were accepted and approved by the committee. And then it went to the full Board of Aldermen. It actually got the votes to be fast-tracked on the perfection order of business, but Alderwoman Spencer said, no, let's wait until next week to give it a little bit more time so we can have more conversation then. So y'all know, to be continued on that one, to be continued, especially because we just getting into the summer and the block is already hot. Okay. It is scorching hot. Okay. Speaking of the block being scorching hot, y'all, and this is our final highlight, Granny. I know time flies when you're having fun. This is our final highlight or low light, no highlight of what happened last week with the Board of Aldermen. So during the full Board of Aldermen meeting, on Friday. The Right to Counsel bill, which is Board Bill 59 for folks if you want to look it up to see what it's given. It was up for final passage. And y'all, I done talked about this multiple times. So again, this bill, if passed, it would provide tenants with a lawyer or an attorney to help them if they are going through the eviction process. And so the week before the holiday, the Board of Aldermen met, and I know I didn't have Monday Night Live after that, but y'all, when I tell you that discussion was spicy, that discussion was spicy. And you know, it ended up getting the votes to be perfected, but you know, that spiciness, it spilled over into Friday's full Board of Aldermen meeting. But before we get into the spice, I do want to play this clip from Alderwoman Clark Hubbard because she kind of wanted to set the record straight. Like I said, after that spicy mess going on, she wanted people to know straight up, this is what the bill do. This is what the bill don't do. So I want to play this clip because she wanted everybody to know what it was. So I'm going to play this clip for y'all.
I just want to really thank all the people that reached out to me after last week's meeting to have real conversations, talk about the facts and what this bill does and not what this bill doesn't do. And so some of the things that I just wanted to know, just for stats, that when tenants, especially tenants that have been mistreated, show up, only 3% of them have had legal counsel, while landlords roughly have about 82%. And that this legislation does not go after good landlords. As a matter of fact, Right to Counsel doesn't go after landlords at all. It empowers tenants that have been voiceless and taken advantage of. And landlords,
in the chambers,
just
please.
landlords initiate this legal process. So it's not to say that just because they have one want the other. It's actually just balancing the scale and making sure that people, again, are not being wrongly taken advantage of in this eviction process. So I really believe in the work that's been done against this 2 years in the making, and it's been done in this legislation. I believe in our new director of the Department of Human Services, Dr. Pearson, that will be taking this on. And I believe in the work that we've done here down at the Board of Aldermen, again, to show our support for tenants here now with this legislation in the city of St. Louis.
So what do you think? You think that sounds, how do you feel about this bill, again, supporting tenants going through eviction?
Oh, I think it's kind of a two-sided thing. I think some tenants are being treated unfairly, and they probably do need some help to combat whatever's happening with the landlord. But what about those people that deliberately don't pay rent? And you've got people like that. They think that they can just live in somebody's place for nothing. So it's almost something you have to take on a case-by-case basis. To me, rather than make one general law for everybody. How's that going to work?
It's funny, your thoughts and what you mentioned that, because we're gonna go right next to who. You already know who I'm talking about this clip. So literally, after Alderwoman Clark Hubbard uttered that last sentence, and it was like she paused, then y'all know who had to get up and say something in response. Yes, I'm talking about Alderwoman Sharon Tyus, y'all. So listen to her thoughts on the bill.
Madam President, members of the board, I rise in opposition of this legislation. I have been a tenants' right counsel at legal service. I've been a landlord for over 30 something years. I've also had to evict a few people. This does take something away from not landlords like me, because I will have an attorney. And so I don't mind it takes something away from, and who I heard from were the people that I spoke about, the elderly, the people who use a 4-family or 2-family as a income or secondary income or to supplement their income. And these are people that usually give people a long time to abuse the process. And when they finally try to get people out, they do not leave. And it's hard to get them out. And this will now give people a added, and when I say people, I mean tenants. That would give them a tool that we're not giving to the people who have given them a home to live in. I heard from elected officials on the state level, and I already know this is going to happen. It's happening all over America where we are putting these things in place. The state legislature is coming back and taking it right away. And they're going to do that right here in Missouri, because I talked to state legislators who said, Sharon, you said exactly what we already know. Any kind of legislation has to be fair. Had we had something in here that says we exempt out small landlords that have 1 and 2 family flats or whatever, or that we says, okay, we're going to give them an attorney, we're also going to give the landlords who are these small people an attorney so that they're on even keel. I disagree with the Alderwoman from the 10th, and I know better. It is not started by the landlord. It's started by tenants who don't pay their rent. And somehow people think that people have a right to, they have a right to have some place to live. You have a right to have water. You have a right to have.
We need order in the chamber. Please maintain order in the chamber.
Madam, if they do that again, I'm going to ask that they be removed. You don't have a right to live in people's property that they own. Just like I don't have a right to go to the grocery store and get food. Just like I don't have a right to get water from the city of St. Louis. In fact, we're raising the water 40%, and the people don't have a right to get the water that they want to. And if you turn that water on, the city will come out and turn it back off, and they can arrest you. You don't have a right to electricity that belongs to Ameren. You don't have a right to Spire gas. You do not have a right to MSD's to sewer. You don't have these rights to things that you have to pay for. You have to pay to live in a park. Madam President. Madam President.
Up in the gallery.
Madam President. Madam President.
So, what were your thoughts on her comment?
I can see where she stands. I can see if she's, but you can't put everybody in that same situation, because I personally know of one of your family members from back when you were born. They refused to pay rent, and when the eviction process was begun, they waited. They knew the law and everything, and they moved just in time not to be put out. That's when they put stuff out on the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would go to another place and they do the same thing. They never paid. They're the kind of people that put phones and babies' names in the family, and
yeah, but that's not every.
That's what I'm saying.
You know.
I said that's an individual thing. That's not something that everybody fits into. And there are people like that, but there are people who are not like that.
Well,
and I'll tell you who that is when we get
okay. I was like, don't do it here. No, not on my watch. But I was telling my granny how the people, they were yelling in the background. So those are the folks, if you ever come to a Board of Aldermen meeting in person, there's a galley, which is literally right above where the president, like where she's, we're literally, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I believe there were some folks that have been organizing and that have been, supporting the bill and help, with this bill in this.
Because there are some lousy landlords. Sometimes you see stuff on TV where the people, they're vermin in the house and no water and the toilets don't work and all of that. And I guess my thing is, if you're not happy, move, but everybody can't do that.
But again, like,
And where can you move?
But all the bill does, it just makes sure people have legal counsel. If they are terrible tenants, they're gonna lose the case. So, like, I mean,
but if they're not terrible tenants and they're living under terrible conditions,
right? But that's what from what I understand, that's kind of what the bill is to support the underdog. You know what I mean?
Right. And I can understand that they would need some help.
Yeah. And so that's what that's what it's intended to do. But like I said, I wanted to lift up the people yelling in the galley, and whoever that was yelling. I'm like, dang, like the one meeting I don't go to in person, they escorting people out. It's action. Usually I'm up there. It's me, maybe a couple lobbyists or something. And it's just me up there, like stretching out, trying to stay cool because it's hot as hell. Because they ain't got air conditioning in there.
Still,
they just got them fans blowing that hot ass air. But they had to escort that lady out of the galley because she was getting passionate after all the woman tires.
She might be waiting on Miss Tice on the side.
I mean, she can literally, because you walk down, because there's the doors where they leave to go to their offices. Yeah. I'm not saying that's what she did, and I'm not condoning violence of older people. Okay. But anyway, so the Board of Aldermen, they went back and forth a little bit more. But ultimately they passed the bill. And there was only one person that voted against the bill. And you already know who that was.
Who would that be?
Alderwoman Sharon Tyus, clearly. But it passed. So there you have it.
But it just wouldn't be a blanket thing for. What about the people that we were talking about that intentionally don't pay? They get that protection too.
Yeah, that's what the bill does. It at least gives people, their right to legal counsel if they're facing eviction. So I know.
Okay.
But I think the intent again was supporting the little people.
I mean, but don't they kind of have to examine it case by case, or just a blanket everybody?
But I feel like if you as a tenant, if you literally, you know what I'm saying, if you were in the wrong, wouldn't it show? I'm just saying, if you're this like horrible tenant, even if you do have legal counsel, if you weren't doing what you're supposed to do, if the receipts were there.
The crazies are out here.
Okay, but I'm just saying, but not everyone is like that.
Okay.
Everyone isn't like that.
I know that. I'm saying.
But I that's another perspective.
That's why I'm saying they need somebody to distinguish who is and who isn't.
Well,
that's a job for somebody.
It is. Well, dang, Granny, you should have gotten it to Alderwoman Clark Hoover before they passed the bill. So that's it for tonight. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for you.
Well, it wasn't painful, but I don't think I helped you much. I didn't.
Yeah, you provided a very different perspective.
Well, you were inspecting that.
Yes, we do. And again, y'all, this is like an attempt. One of the things that we're trying through Transform 314 is to bring people together. And that also means like bridging those generational divides. Clearly, like we're not going to agree on all the things, but we can agree to disagree. But at the end of the day, we want to see the same things, right? We do. We want to have safe, healthy, thriving, popping.
Well, in how old am I? 89 years. Stuff has changed a lot.
A lot. I know. A lot. But I think, like I said, at the end of the day, I think we all do want the same things. But because our society has changed, I mean, like you grew up You know what I'm saying? Listen to the radio. Like,
Yeah, that was our entertainment.
I mean, think about that compared to where we are now. You know what I'm saying?
No soul music, nothing but the top 10 that people that didn't look like me
Mm-hmm.
said was the music.
That's real. So I really enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully we can have you on at another time if you would be open.
Have some juicy subjects, please.
I will try. I will try. I'll try. Oh Lord, is she gonna get me in trouble? So thank you again for gracing us on our platform. Was there anything, do you want to leave the people with anything before we shake tonight?
No, I think you did a very good job of keeping everything together as you do with everything else.
Thank you. All right, y'all. Please be safe out there. Stay hydrated. And we will be, we're going to be doing the same damn thing next week, same time. And next week's the third Monday of the month. And
Dang,
I
already.
know it's flying by. And that means, yes, the homie Vanna, the third Monday of the month, she hops on and we talk our ish. So she will be in the virtual building, in the virtual space. Until then, y'all stay safe out there and see you next week. Peace.